Hello, welcome to Thursday's Hotline Live with Record Sport. I'm joined as always by the one and only Keith Jackson. Keith,
Good evening.
how are you?
I'm okay. Some of us got home at a sensible time last night after the game, mainly because it was the last train. It decided my timetable for me, but yeah, I'm feeling great. Andy, how you feeling?
That brings us to Andy Newport. Andy, how's it going?
Yeah, you can still taste the sausage supper I had at 1 o'clock last night. So, yeah, we're getting through the day. Well, it's still a best time. That's can be said about it. So,
yeah, you're in the finishing stretch here, Andy. Just get through this without falling asleep.
Aye. For anyone watching, we had a little hotline gathering last night to watch the Europa League final. And it was good. It was good apart from the football.
The game was rotten.
It was a bit of a letdown, wasn't it? Let's
but
concentrate.
A happy ending.
Aye, good for Big Ange, and we will talk about Ange a little bit later on and the game.
I have to say though, before we move on, if you've ever seen a goal that was a fitting winner for a football match, it was that one, wasn't it?
I know.
Rubbish. Everything about it was rubbish, apart from the fact that Big Ange got to do his mic drop at the end. So
the Donkey Cup.
Yeah.
Scottish football never lets us down. That's never boring. And I think that's the place for us to start. It's obviously a couple of days before the Cup final. This is a sort of Cup final special. Yeah. Celtic and Aberdeen going for the Scottish Cup at Hampden on Saturday. But before we talk about that, Keith, we need to open up with the ongoing Rangers managerial saga. You've put a story which is currently on Record Sport Online just now. What's the latest you can tell us?
The latest is that despite interest in Russell Martin from Leicester, I think he remains keen on the Rangers job to such an extent that I've just written a story there that he's kind of putting together what his backroom team would look like, and one of the I think a surprise inclusion in that would be the former Rangers defender Maurice Ross. I say surprise because there's nothing, you don't really look at the pair and think, well, they spent time together here or they know each other from there or whatever. But actually they went through the SFA's coaching school together, did their badges together. I think there's a friendship there. And I think Maurice Ross is held in quite high regard in terms of his coaching abilities. So if Russell Martin is successful, I think you can expect Maurice Ross to return to the club, and that would be like 25 years, I think, after he broke through into the Rangers first team as a kid. Obviously, I genuinely think that first and foremost, in order for that to happen, I think the Steven Gerrard thing is going to have to fall away. And it's interesting, Daniel, that today, despite, and we've been talking about it, we talked about it last night, about the endless sort of nuggets of news that are getting thrown about and, creating rabbit holes for us to go and dive down. So there's been constant speculation. Gerrard's in Scotland, he's at such a hotel, he's here, he's there, his hairdresser's turning up at Auchenhowie. Gerrard today put out a social media post, which would appear, at least because he's not actually in the video, it would appear at least to be to place him on a beach in Bahrain, which is kind of exactly where we thought he was all this time. In any case, I wrote a story a couple of days ago about this one, Dan. I did say that a major part of Steven Gerrard's decision-making here in terms of his future next step will come down to lifestyle choices. That his wife and family are really settled in the Middle East. They love it in Bahrain. From the video that was posted, you could see why. And if anything, I think Alex, his wife, long-term partner, kind of quite fancies the idea of staying out there, maybe Dubai, that sort of a neck of the woods rather than Govan. Don't know why. And let's bear in mind that when Gerrard was here the first time around, she didn't make it up from Merseyside. She stayed down the road. So I think they've got a lot to talk over. It all kind of chimes in with Rangers coming out yesterday, sort of giving out a briefing that nothing was likely to happen before the end of this week. They also said no preferred candidate, no offers made, etc., etc. But I think everything starts to point towards next week. You wonder if that was Steven Gerrard just saying, putting a bit of distance between himself and the story. I don't know. Only he'll know these reasons and motivations for putting that video out. But it does leave Russell Martin as a candidate, and it does leave Davide Ancelotti as a potential candidate as well, given that we do think, Andy, don't we, that he's been spoken to, and I think his final act on the coaching staff at Real Madrid under his old man will be a game on Saturday against Real Sociedad. So that, that could prompt something, although I'm very wary of the Ancelotti thing. I have been from the start, and also he's down to go with his dad to Brazil for a couple of games at the start of June, Paraguay and Ecuador, I think. So, yeah, interesting, but it looks slowly but surely as if the thing is starting to crystallise. And you just can't, Andy, I think, anyway, rule out the possibility that there's another horse somewhere that nobody's identified yet that might still be running. So, I don't know what your thoughts are on Andy, but that's
I agree. I think it's just very obviously this whole search, and we're left scrambling about trying to get the latest on it and bring the readers and the viewers updates on it. It's very difficult. The new regime that are obviously inching towards their takeover aren't giving much away, as obviously they're right, and it makes our life as journalists very difficult. But I just think when I look at the names of the candidates, I'm just a bit surprised by them, because obviously Gerrard's in there because he's past association with the club, but he's in a markedly different sort of category as a coach from certainly what Russell Martin is, and what we presume Davide Ancelotti will be. Say what you want about Steven Gerrard as a player and as a coach, but he was pragmatic here first time round. If he had to sort of batten down the hatches at Rangers, he would do that. If he had to, stepping up the midfield, he would do that. He wasn't this sort of idealist that Russell Martin is, who will play his way come rain or shine. And I just think that makes me wonder if the people involved, if Gerrard is a legitimate candidate, as we believe he is certainly on a long list at the very least, if not a short list. Then do they really know what they're looking for? And in that sense, does that make me think that maybe there could be somebody else completely? Because as I say, we get these strong signals, obviously from Spain with the reports over there with Ancelotti. Gerrard's camp, I must say, they're very quiet. There's not much being said at all. Certainly, his agents aren't saying anything at the moment. Not that they ever do it, to be honest. They're not the most opening when it comes to the media. And then obviously the Russell Martin links. Obviously, he's out of work right now. He's looking to get back in. I think these Leicester rumours are very strong as well. So I agree with you, Keith. I think there's potential for another twist this year. A name that hasn't quite come out yet. I just I wouldn't be surprised at all if we saw a really left field name come out in the days to come. I don't know if that's what the Rangers fans want to be hearing right now. I think they will be anxious to get this concluded as quickly as possible so they can get on to the real business. And the real business is signing players and overhauling our squad. Because I think I've said before in the hotline, whatever manager comes in, I still don't think that's the big thing that has to happen at Ibrox this summer. I think it's the squad. The squad, doesn't matter who you put in charge of the squad that they have there at the moment, they're not going to be able to challenge Celtic. They're not good enough. They need a fast overhaul of that squad if they're to make a serious go. Anytime soon, never mind next season. It needs big work in that. So I think that the Rangers fans, they want to get this, get a name settled and secured and signed. But after that, that's when they want to see the manager get down to proper work, because we say the team returns to pre-season training on June the 23rd. First qualifiers a month after that, July 22nd. So, there's literally not a second to be wasted right now.
What's your gauge, Andy, on where the Rangers fans are at with the whole Russell Martin idea? Behind it, not behind it? I'm getting the feeling that might be a bit of a hard sell.
Yeah, lukewarm. I think it's difficult because, there's obviously the Gerrard factor will be divisive as well. I think some fans are of the mind never to go back, sort of thing. And especially when you look at what Gerrard's done since he left Ibrox. But I think for a lot, and I would say the majority, I would think fans would just like to have that figurehead, that lead character type aura that Steven Gerrard brings. I think they would like to see that. I think for a lot of fans, they look down the years and past characters that have been in charge. It's a Souness, it's a Smith, it's a Jock Wallace, big men, big characters, forceful characters. I think they would get on board with the idea of that coming back. But I think that the Russell Martin thing, I mean, like or not, I think a lot of it will be sort of coloured by his own time at the club. It was a fairly dreadful time to be a Rangers player, and he certainly didn't do much to sort of improve the situation. He's 6 months up here, so he was obviously coming to the end of his career. His legs were very much on the wane, and obviously it was the season before Gerrard came in. I think it was. So I think maybe that, but then you look at and obviously his Premier League, the record this year was abject. Southampton very lucky not to go down with a record points low. He was obviously relieved his duties long before the end of the season, but I think what you can look at is his championship team. They won it with a certain. They get promoted, with a certain amount of flair. He's obviously got a style of football that he wants to play, and he sticks it to it rigidly. I mean, I think that was maybe his undoing this season. You've seen the amount of goals that Southampton lost trying to play out for the back with players that just simply weren't good enough to do it at that level. That I think would be a major concern as well. That if he's going to start having, Clinton Ciala try to dribble out of defence,
could be interesting.
That might some of the more how do we say Brexit type of Rangers support, Brexit ball fans might be thinking, just get up the park, mate. So I just wonder how if he's going to be, if he's learned from that rather chastening experience in the Premier League this year, where his team were picked apart time and time again, but continued to play this adventurous system when Sean Dyche type wouldn't be getting caught out like that. So
yeah.
It's interesting, the whole thing. You're right, Andy, as well, and the variety of different sort of candidates that they appear to be assessing. There's not a trend. It doesn't seem there's kind of two approaches here. There's flexibility and there's philosophy, and there's a kind of scattergun here. It's not as if they've profiled 5 guys that all kind of do something similar, just with their own little twist on it. Completely different. So but I think I'm hopeful that by the beginning of next week things should start to be a little bit more easy to understand, Andy.
We're getting plenty of comments, and if you want to get involved, please do so in the discussions below. We've got a few people asking about Celtic, the team for the weekend. We will talk about that a little bit later on, but just to kind of finish up on the Rangers stuff. First of all, Keith, Gianni's written in saying Daniel looks as rough as they come. I wasn't even drinking last night, so that's good. Thanks very much, Gianni.
Just to be confidence booster, you need Daniel.
Yeah, exactly. I know, absolutely perfect.
Unbelievable. 1 minute
me and Keith are hanging. And we look great.
1 minute you're riling, the next you're looking rough as anything.
Exactly, I know. Right, on to the business though. Haining says Russell Martin's got disaster written all over it. He'd get eaten alive. Jimbo says it's got nothing to do with his time at the club. He's a Warburton. Plan A isn't working. Plan B is do better. On Facebook, if I can find it. Johnny says, Mo Ross and Russell Martin, it must be April Fool's. Geez, that's to be one of the most underwhelming management career in Rangers history. I think he means appointment. Yeah. Stephen says, if it's between these two, Gerrard or Martin, I'd rather have Barry back. And James Hall, with an impassioned plea, says, Barry and co, get them a 3-year contract and rebuild the team. Stop getting all the time wasters. Barry's heart is there, and that's such a great foundation for the club. He knows the place inside out. He knows the fans. Anyone else a waste of time. There is no one mentioned with fantastic experience. Rangers cannot afford another big-time manager. Give it to Barry. He'll be a success given the opportunity. He deserves a chance. And just to round off on that, Hoopsaholic simply says, don't go on your holidays yet, Barry, if I can find the comment. So yeah, plenty of comment coming in. If you want to get involved in the discussion, please do so. You can get involved as well, Keith.
I think the good ship Barry has sailed. And listen, I'll pay at the risk of repeating myself. I did say, I've said a couple of nights, I found the decision, the rush to make a separation with Barry Ferguson and his backroom team, I found it odd. I find it even more odd now, because I could have understood it if they'd got their guy nailed down and in a position to announce him on the Monday. Clearly that's not the case. So they've got a team in there that was a potential safety net, and they've let it go. I mean, how embarrassing would it be for Rangers if they did end up in a situation where they had to go crawling back cap in hand and say, hey, Barry, know how we kind of thought you weren't the guy? Well, I mean, that would be ludicrous. But I agree with a lot of those comments.
Aye. They're coming in thick and fast. Let's keep them coming. But should we move on to the cup final?
Yes.
Celtic and Aberdeen, the Scottish Cup final at the weekend. I think it's fair to say, Keith, that Celtic are the huge favourites. But listen, someone was asking the other day what we do during the day, and it's a fair question. One of the jobs I had today was spending over an hour on a graphic just in case Aberdeen win the cup. And it might never see the light of day, but just in case.
Daniel, come on.
Exactly, just in case.
I'm going to be happy with that. Just in case.
I mean, look at that. I mean, if they don't win, I can call the Louvre or something, just have it sent over there. But are they going to do it?
This is a perfect example of you absolutely wasting time and stealing a wage. If that's what you do with your day, you've created an image for Aberdeen winning the Scottish Cup.
It's not all I've done.
I guarantee you that you'd put it up on there just now just to show people that you actually do stuff.
There you go.
There you go. There's Daniel, because it'll never, ever, ever see the light of day. I guarantee it.
No chance.
It'll never be used. You've just wasted everybody's time.
It's the season of cup upsets, as we saw last night. Andy, did you give Aberdeen any chance?
No. And that's no slight in Aberdeen, I promise you. I just think that Celtic, as they showed the other night up at Pittodrie, even their second string blew them away. I think Celtic should be aiming to win this by a comfortable margin. I think at the very least 2 or 3. It seems a conservative estimate. They are just far and away the best team in the country, with the most firepower, the most options off the bench. If one of the starters isn't at it, they've got another guy in the bench ready to go, ready and firing. I fully expect Celtic to wrap up the treble with goals to spare.
Mikey says, Keith, who starts on Saturday? Forrest or Kuhn, McCowan or Bernardo?
If it was me, and it's obviously not for a very good reason, I'm going Forrest all day long, just all day long, and I'm not doing it out of sentiment. I'm doing it because you saw when he came off the bench the other day the impact that he had. He got his goal, obviously, right in a fairy tale in the process, the 94th minute, but it wasn't just that. The impact he had down that right-hand side, the chances he was creating, the way he was running at people, it was just peak James Forrest. And James Forrest does tend to peak at this time of the year, doesn't he? For me, and Nicholas Kuhn has been excellent, and he is a really good player, and he'll probably feel, as if he's deserving of a start in the cup final, but not for me. It's James Forrest for me all day long. And the Bernardo and McCowan one, I would probably have gone for Bernardo maybe a little earlier in the season, but everything that I've seen from McCowan, I've been quietly impressed by. So that one's almost a coin toss, that one. But in terms of Forrest or Kuhn, it's Forrest for me all day long.
You agree with that, Andy?
I think back to Eddie Jones. Remember the older England rugby coach? He didn't talk about substitutes. He's talked about starters and finishers. I think that's where James Forrest is best. He can be a guy who can still come on in the clutch moments, end of games, and get big moments. As you obviously saw at the weekend. So I still think Celtic's best starting 3 is obviously Maeda on the wing. Through the middle.
Jota.
On the left, obviously, him being injured, but and Kuhn. So, but I think, obviously with Jota being out, you have to put Maeda out on the wing. I think Admira's had a really sort of strong finish to the season. So, listen, I can see them going with that, and then depending how tight the game is, Forrest coming on and having a big hand in the latter stages. But I agree with Keith. I think Luke McCowan. I think it's not easy going from somewhere like Dundee to and the expectation levels there to walk into a Celtic squad full of international players and with a demand to win literally every single game and to go and challenge and win titles every single time. And I think he's coped with that step up remarkably well, and I think he fully deserves a starting slot if he gets one this weekend.
David Gillespie kind of agrees with you, Andy. Says, which one gives you the bigger lift coming from the bench? For me, it's Forrest.
Why wait? Just get him on.
No.
Start him. And by the way, look, does it matter? Probably not. It's not going to make any, whether it's James Forrest or whether it's Kuhn, it's just a marginal sort of a gain or loss either way. It's not going to change the outcome of this final. This final has got bloodbath written all over it. For me, I would send James Forrest out there and just terrify them. Just get out there and terrify them. Because
he's got a great record at Hampden as well, isn't he?
Of course he loves the space. It's such a big pitch. And I kind of get the feeling with it that Aberdeen, there's real scar tissue. There's scars that haven't had time to heal. When Aberdeen started the season so strongly, what was it, after 11 games, there was nothing between them?
It was 11 wins in a row up to Celtic Park when they drew 2 each, wasn't it?
That's right. So, phenomenal start to the season. And the worst thing that they could have done was they went to Celtic Park and they got that draw. And then Celtic said, right, okay, it's time to flex the muscles a little bit. And a couple of weeks later, they had Aberdeen at Hampden in the League Cup semi-final and they battered them by 6. And since then, Aberdeen, you can trace Aberdeen's decline this season straight back to pinpoint it to that afternoon at Hampden. And they'll be returning there, same stage, same team, same opponents. And as Andy said rightly, just a couple of weeks after, the B team went up with Pittodrie and hammered them their own pitch. So for me, I think Aberdeen go into this, I think they're going to be, I genuinely suspect that mentally they're going into this in a really bad place. And even if, Jimmy Tilleen gets them up and gets them going and the fans are there, and the minute Celtic get on top of this game, be it just with the opening goal or just the momentum of the match itself, Aberdeen will start to panic a little bit because they've been on the end of some really severe doings. And this one, I think that the worry is for Aberdeen that they're going into this hoping not to be humiliated. And that just about seems to be the best that they can hope for at this point.
It's absolutely crazy. 1990, Andy, since they actually won the Scottish Cup, Aberdeen. But I think he's right. You can't create an argument for Aberdeen winning on Saturday, as bad as that sounds.
And you think as well, I mean, it's crazy that a club that were so consistently throughout that period where Rangers were down in the divisions, were so consistently the second force in Scotland. And listen, they came so close a few times. We got a lot of cup finals under Derek McInnes and just couldn't get over that line. Only that one League Cup win was at 2014. So, yeah, listen, I think Aberdeen fans can be disappointed with the lack of silverware that they've enjoyed over the last 3 decades. Listen, they've got a puncher's chance, but what a shock it would be. And it seems ridiculous saying that team sitting 5th in the top flight, you would regard it as a huge shock, but I think it would fall into that category just on the basis of how dominant Celtic have been, especially in these heads-to-heads with Aberdeen. And, if they can, you're obviously talking about that result back at the 2-2 draw at Celtic Park at the beginning of the season, but, a lot has happened since then. Aberdeen had a long, almost probably an even longer slump after that sort of that period of your top form, yeah. And I just wonder what, obviously they really limped home in the league. Obviously ended up finishing 5th with that defeat at Tannadice. I just wonder what that has done to their any remaining sort of sense of belief in the camp. Will that strip them, or does it perhaps galvanise them? Do they go, right, we've got nothing else to lose here? Do we out and we go out all guns firing? I'm not sure that. Listen, as I said, I just think Celtic are, even though, as I said, the B team, the reserves and the team are far too strong for Aberdeen. I can't imagine that with a treble on the line. And you've got to remember, as well, okay, guys like Callum McGregor have won plenty of these, but Adam Eders talk about he's not won a treble. Liam Scales, I remember speaking to him after the semi-final at Hampden. It'd be his first treble. There's members of that team that are desperate to get this job done. So I just think it'll be too strong with all those things considered.
I think Brendan Rodgers used a phrase earlier in his press conference today, Daniel, that the players can write their names in the cement of the club. And it's true, because what Celtic are achieving, and I've said this previously, is extraordinary. This is not normal. This is the opposite of normal. It used to be a treble would come along once in a while, and people would say, well, what an incredible season that is. That's spectacular. It is. It doesn't get any better domestically than winning all the competitions in your own backyard. For Celtic, what would this be? Sixth treble in 9 years?
6 in 9 years, right?
That's ridiculous.
It's remarkable.
We're moving into the grounds of the absolutely insane. That's how good this is for Celtic. This is a period of time that has never been a dominance quite like it. There never will be again, I would reason. But it is just a matter of how long Celtic can continue it. The motivation is there. The right people are in charge in terms of who's in the dugout, who's wearing the armband. Celtic will come out of that tunnel looking to take another step into history. And I actually feel quite sorry for Aberdeen that they're the ones that need to get in their way.
John says in the comments there, Keith, that trebles are the new normal now, but as you've been at pains to point out, it shouldn't be considered that way. The trebles
shouldn't. And that would be the sort of biggest concern for Celtic, is that trebles now equal par, and that can't be. That's actually not a healthy situation.
I totally agree, Keith, because like people are saying now, if they don't win the Scottish Cup final, does it tarnish this season in some way?
Yeah, I know.
Just a double.
How can you win a league by 17 points and it not be special? It being somewhere disappointment. I think that is a nonsense notion. I think Celtic deserve every bit of praise that's come this season, because they've been fantastic from day one. Anytime they've had a blip, the way Brendan Rodgers has managed to navigate the emotional highs of these moments. You look at the obviously the 7-1 game against Tottenham. That had the potential to absolutely send Celtic into a tailspin, because you just look back at the way Rangers, when they had a really difficult few results in the Champions League, it absolutely knocked them for 6 and undeniably had an impact in their league form that eventually was pretty much what cost Giovanni Van Bronckhorst his job. But Celtic they learned from it, shrugged it off. You see them go into obviously the games afterwards in the competition. They don't ever get their pants pulled down again, and domestically they just get better and better. Yeah, there's been a couple of off days, but I think that was just a lack of pressure that was on them. They could afford to coast at certain moments, but Celtic have been, thoroughly deserving of every single bit of praise that's come their way this season.
The last little bit, Keith, that we should touch on in regards to Celtic was Brendan Rodgers today mentioned that Greg Taylor, the door is not closed on him signing a new contract at Celtic. I think previously a lot of people had thought that maybe he was close to going. I think Rodgers has said that as well. I've said it before, I don't get the animosity from a certain section of the Celtic support towards him. I think he's a brilliant player, and I hope Celtic can keep him.
Listen, I've said it all along. I've maintained that Celtic should be doing everything in their power to keep him, and that might involve, rather than the finances of it all, it probably involves this conversation that Brendan Rodgers has had with him in terms of how he sees his role in the squad when Kieran Tierney comes to the club. He's never been a fan's favourite, Greg Taylor, and it baffles me. I've spoken at length throughout the season in terms of what I felt he brought to them on the European level, because he learned the inverted fullback thing, and because I think when he first broke into the first team at Kilmarnock, I think he was a midfielder as a kid, who then became a fullback, and you can see that in his play. You can see when he's on the ball, he plays like a midfield player. He's so comfortable coming in, and that for me, after the Dortmund game that Andy mentioned, that for me was such a big thing, that Celtic decided they had to make a change. They had to be harder to play through in those certain areas. And part of that was Greg Taylor coming in off the left-hand side and, doubling up beside Cal McGregor at the base of the midfield. And I thought it made such a difference. I think he's an intelligent player. I think he's dangerous getting forward. He's composed on the ball. I think he's been a terrific servant for Celtic. And that's why I couldn't understand. There was, when Jeffrey Schlupp comes in, I felt there was a kind of element in the Celtic support that were desperate to say, right, well, that's him. We don't need Greg Taylor anymore. We've got Jeffrey Schlupp. And I think over the period, certainly these last few weeks of the season, there was a point when you wondered if Greg Taylor was ever going to be seen again in a Celtic shirt. And now he's a stick-on starter in the cup final.
No.
So,
Sorry, I was just going to say, do you see a prospect next season of perhaps Greg Taylor and Kieran Tierney actually playing the same Celtic team? I mean, obviously, I think Celtic will be eager to make sure they've got a replacement for Kieran Tierney if he's going to be the left back, because of the injury record that he has had over the last few years. But I just look at the way Kieran Tierney sort of developed, especially in Scotland, playing as a sort of centre back, okay, in a 3. But I think the amount of times that Celtic will dominate so much of the ball that I think they could get away with playing Kieran Tierney at a centre back and then having Greg Taylor on the outside of him. I think that's a scenario you could see playing out next season.
Yeah, I mean, Celtic are unlikely to go 3 at the back and sort of copy the Steve Clarke blueprint.
Yeah,
but could Kieran Tierney play left of a pairing, Cameron Carter-Vickers? Listen, Kieran Tierney for me, when he's fit, he's a Rolls Royce, and I think he can play in just about any position that you ask him to. So I do think he could do that, and I think you're right, Andy. You can imagine home games at Celtic Park in the league. They've got all the ball, and having Kieran Tierney going on a roving commission from centre back, that's just another body, another creative spark, another guy that's able to drive forward. Yes, to answer the question, I think it is doable. Do I think it would be the setup that you would wish for if you were going in against teams in the Champions League or into derby days in Glasgow? No, I don't. But in games when you've got 80-90% possession at Celtic Park, and it's just a matter of trying to break teams down, I think that's feasible, Andy. I do.
I just raise that because if you're trying to give assurances over game time, that is definitely a way you can say him, because obviously Greg Taylor's view will be that Kieran Tierney's coming in as first choice. I'm back in the bench for the majority of the season. But if you can say to him, listen,
we're looking
80-90% of home games, we can maybe have Kieran starting at centre back. You're going to be the left back then. You can still get that, as you say, that licence to come into the middle of the pitch, get involved in play. Tierney could be doing the underlaps round you from centre back. I mean, I think it's a setup that could work for Celtic. Brendan Rodgers will know far better than me, but I'm just thinking in terms of ways to, just assure them that, listen, there is a big part for you to play next season. That's maybe one way that you could get around the situation.
Yeah, and listen, the amount of games that Celtic pile up over the course of a season, domestically and in Europe, there's going to be a lot of game time for Greg Taylor if he stays. I'm convinced of that. Either way, even if, this suggestion of moving Kieran Tierney around to get him into the team, even without that, even if that's not in anybody's thinking, I think there's still plenty of football for Greg Taylor if he stays at Celtic next season. I think he might get frustrated at the idea that, so the Champions League comes around and I get papped onto a bench. But you know what? I think he's thoroughly enjoyed his time at Celtic. He's got a trophy cabinet which is straining. And if the manager is making it clear how badly he's wanted, I'd be struggling if I was Greg Taylor to think, I definitely need to get away from this hell where I'm winning trebles and getting into big European games, and I think there's cause for reflection from Greg Taylor, and the fact that a manager like Brendan Rodgers is making him feel that important, I think it's a big thing as well. And let's not forget, Greg Taylor really is, and I've mentioned this, the sort of leadership group at Celtic. He's got a massive role to play in that. He does play a massive role in it. He's really well respected by his teammates, and he's seen as a senior figure and one of the kind of stalwarts of the dressing room. And that's a big thing for him to give up as well. And we've seen so many, and we keep saying it on here, Daniel, so many examples of players that thought the grass might be greener and have gone away and they've regretted it from almost day one. And they know at that point, I'll never get that chance again.
Well, from one cup final to another before we finish, John Watt says, will Ange get another season or will he get the sack? I think Levy will hope that Ange walks himself. Obviously, Ange Postecoglou, European champion, Europa League winner.
Incredible success.
Even if you're a Rangers fan, it must have been you must have been kind of rooting for Ange to get that trophy last night. Just everything he's been through.
Do you think so?
I almost said that with a straight face.
Have you been in Glasgow for long, Daniel?
No wonder you stay in Falkirk, wee man.
I was going to say I tried to get through that with a straight face, but it wasn't happening.
His story is incredible, isn't it? When you think about it, at this stage, he's not a spring chicken. It took him a long time to manage to get to Europe because people have this snobbery about Australian coaches and what's this guy? What do they know about football on the other side of the world? Have you seen the shirts and the shorts they wear? That's not the same sport. So he had to fight and fight and fight to prove his worth in order to get to Asia, then in order to get to Scotland. Then he comes in at Celtic and he revolutionises the way that Celtic play football. It was astonishing and so successful that he earns his crack at the Premier League. And he hits that like a hurricane for 6 months. I think then he started to find problems because I kind of expected myself, I think we spoke about this last night, the first round of fixtures in the English Premier League, they're not going to know what's hit them. By the time the second games come around, they've got coaching staff, they've got the video analysis, they've got time to study and prepare for, and this is how you deal with that. And I think he's struggled after that initial kind of round of playing everybody once, and this season has been a struggle. Injuries haven't helped. Again, I'll go back to the fact that I'm not sure that isn't just a byproduct of Ange Postecoglou's training, the intensity. People are going to get injured. Did the players like that at Spurs? Maybe not. Maybe there's been a bit of a backlash. And then ultimately, do you know what? In order to win that trophy that he always does in his second season, mate, he had to basically bust Ange Ball, didn't he? That was anti-Ange Ball that we saw last night.
Last night, Keith, in the pub, was it water natural?
I mean, it's rubbish. He basically Walter Smithed them. And it was a brutal watch, made no better by the fact that Man United are a gang. Rubbish quality for a European final. Was kind of hoping going into it, Daniel, that they might level each other out in terms of that they're both struggling. We could get an absolute cracker here. It could be a 4-4. It could be absolute mayhem out there. It wasn't. It was two teams that looked shot to bits in terms of their confidence, that believe themselves to be bad sides. And, as I said, Ange has had to ditch his whole philosophy in order to get that trophy. Now, you wonder, even at his age, and they say old dogs don't learn new tricks, maybe that's something, if Ange does stay in the position, he'll take into next season. That there are more than one way to skin a cat, and maybe he has to temper when it's sometimes it's the right thing to do. You would think 99% of Tottenham's games on their own pitch, they should be able to play the game that he wants it played. But there are times when, do you know what you need to do? You need to win. And in order to do that, you might just need to ditch the philosophy. That's what happened last night, whether it was design, because he realised it, or by fault, because Tottenham are such a bad team and he's missing so many of his better attacking players. But they got there, and I'm really pleased for him, because he's had to put up with quite a lot of abuse down there, and that sort of snobbery. What's an Australian doing down here in the Premier League? Can't see him off the premises quickly enough. Oh, was that right, mate? Well, he's just turned around and delivered a trophy for Spurs for the first time in 17 years. He's a winner.
And Champions League football.
Yeah, which is ridiculous, by the way, but that's another thing entirely.
I'm just intrigued to see how the power dynamic at Spurs plays out next season, because everything we hear about Daniel Levy is he micromanages, he's involved in every aspect of the club, and we see how that sort of then plays out in terms of the continual change that they have with managers. And you've got to say, well, they have all these guys with proven track records, and Mourinho or Conte, and the rest, and Pochettino, the guys that have won trophies elsewhere and be successful elsewhere, but as soon as they go to Spurs, it all falls apart. And I just wonder if this, now that Postecoglou has delivered a trophy, if that just allows him to go to Daniel Levy, right, I'm in charge now, mate, put your faith in me, give me the money, allow me to spend it where I want to spend it, allow me to bring in the guys that I think can play this brand of football that I play. And if that just maybe, if you can really see Spurs fly now, if you can just take a wee bit of that, that compulsive need to be in charge of everything that Daniel Levy has, and if he can just sort of wrestle away the sort of power dynamic, I think that promises to be an intriguing aspect if he decides to stay, because I think it would be no surprise if he decided, given the abuse he's had this season at times, even at times for his own fans, if he goes, actually, it's not going to get any better than this. Perhaps that's maybe his way of thinking. And it's that old leaving him up at the peak of my powers and go somewhere else.
I don't see it, Andy. I think he's made his intentions clear. I think his intention is to stay. I think he absolutely believes in his philosophy and in the way that he wants to play football. I'm convinced of that. I don't think he'll throw in the towel on Spurs. It's what an opportunity it is. And now he's got this platform to build on. And I think it would be absolute madness, an act of madness, if Spurs, having waited all this time to get a manager who can actually stick a trophy in the cabinet, if they thought anything other than, Ange, what do you need for next season? What do you need to go again? What do we need to improve? No question of sacking the guy. I mean, that would be lunacy. But it is Spurs.
It is Spurs. And from one manager to another, just before we finish, guys, Stuart Kettlewell, it appears, is closing in and becoming the new Kilmarnock manager. Our esteemed colleague, Scott Burns, who's the transfer guru, filed the story for Record Sport earlier today, saying that Kettlewell looks set to be Billy Bow's replacement for Derek McInnes. It came a wee bit out of left field to me, but I think it could be a solid appointment.
Yeah, I really do. Look, but Billy Bow's got a real knack for picking good managers. Okay, they don't always come off for him, but you look at the Steve Clarke, Derek McInnes appointment. Kettlewell, not quite the same category as a manager in terms of profile and achievement, but I know that he left Motherwell under a horrible cloud. I thought that was terrible at the time. I'd be delighted for him if he does get this opportunity. And Billy Bow's probably looking at it going, well, this guy's actually got a track record here for certainly promoting young players, getting them into the team, blooding them, selling them on at profit. And Lennon Miller's going to be the absolute golden goose where that's concerned. So it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. I think the initial kind of response when Derek McInnes was leaving was that this looks like an opportunity that's made for Stephen Naismith. According to Scott Burns, Stephen Naismith is fallen by the wayside in terms of the candidates here. That Kettlewell is out in front. There was another couple of names that Scott threw in there that were interesting, that obviously Kilmarnock have been looking at. But Kettlewell emerging as Billy Bowie's pick for the position, and you can see the logic in it, absolutely.
Did you like it, Andy?
Yeah, I think it's a terrific appointment if it goes through, and thoroughly deserved. Stuart Kettlewell's a very good man, a good character. Did a terrific job at Motherwell, and so harshly treated with the way obviously it ended, with that sort of getting kind of forced out of his job because of sort of fan flack. Listen, clubs like Motherwell are going to have ups and downs, but the number one priority for a club like Motherwell surviving in the Premiership. When he took over last season, there were major concerns on that front, and he guided them to say if they had them in the top six for the majority of this season, okay, maybe the standard, the style of football wasn't to everyone's liking, but I think Motherwell fans, they can't be turning their nose up at top six football. And obviously, you saw what happened after they left. They slid down the table. But I think he's right to raise an important point there in terms of what he did with Lennon Miller. I mean, like, he was one who was brave enough to put him in the team, brave enough to name him captain. Really has played a key role in his development. And I just wonder if Billy Bowie's maybe having a think about that with David Watson, because David Watson was looking like he was going to be the next big thing too, but hasn't quite managed to follow that up this season. Hasn't quite hit the same heights he was doing last year, but he was obviously named Young Player of the Year. So I just wonder if he's got one eye on that, thinking maybe perhaps Stuart Kettlewell will be the guy that can get him really firing again. And obviously, if they can get a fee for him, that could be, to get the sort of sums that they're talking about for Lennon Miller, that would be huge for a club like Kilmarnock.
Aye, absolutely. Well, I think that brings us to the end of Thursday night's Hotline Live with Record Sport. Thank you. Oh, actually, sorry, very quickly. Rebel says Livy versus Ross County tonight, of course, first leg. Very quickly, guys, who's going to win? I fancy Livy.
Me too.
I'm throwing mine on Livy. Yep.
Excellent. There you go. Perfect. Thank you very much for all the comments. As ever, we really appreciate it. If you want to get involved in the post-cup final discussion, we'll be back to do this all again on Sunday. We hope you can join us then. Andy, Keith, it's always a pleasure.
Cheers, Daniel.
Cheers, Dan. Well done, Andy. You made it to the end.
Have a good sleep, Andy.
Time for a cure, Andy. It's time for a cure, son.
It's always that time.
On that note, thanks for watching. Cheers.